and welcome. Usually at this point, I introduce my guests, but the two people sitting in front of me need no introduction. Viswanathan Anand, Aruna Anand, thank you so much for joining us today. When you started, there was no culture of chess in this country, like almost no culture. I mean, it was something you played in your house, and you speak about how your mother really encouraged you. In fact, she sort of was a big influence in your life. Was that something that motivated you, the very fact that you saw that she was always standing by your side, sort of, you know, encouraging you to do better?
Yes, at two levels. First of all, she taught me how to play. And I mean, I feel that, you know, when you teach a 6-year-old chess, you really don't know how it's going to go. Maybe they get bored quickly, maybe they don't. And I must have surprised them because I would keep going back to the board, and something obviously fascinated me. And then I joined a chess club. And at that stage, my mother continued being very positive, and she'd encourage me to go to the club often. So there was never this worry, and she genuinely didn't seem to feel it. Same for my dad, that this was competing against my studies or something like that. She said, you know, go, and this was something I was encouraged to do. And I think it's so much better if you don't feel you're going up against them, that they're behind you at this stage. Later on, I would even go there while school exams were going on. You know, I'd finish studying and then make time for a little tournament and then come back and finish studying again and go to the exams in the morning and so on. And that kind of parental backing, you know, was very reassuring for me.
But, you know, it's interesting because in the book you also said that somehow it was easy for you, that you did chess and then you did academics, and somehow it also didn't clash with your exams, and, you know, it was lucky. Do you think that currently, let's say in India, for instance, we can do better encouraging kids to do sports and still balance their studies?
Yes, I think people should be open to the idea that that if you dedicate a lot of time to your sports, that should not worry anyone, because this kind of intense engagement and trying to improve at something is inevitably going to lead you to learn a lot of skills, probably the ones that you might learn academically anyway, but it's a very healthy way of learning, and it shouldn't be taken as a time pass, and that is important. But I was very lucky with timing. So when are the moments that a sports person hesitates between, you know, which career path they should follow? Typically 10th standard, the +2 exams, you know, when you're deciding a stream afterwards, and maybe right when you finish college. So if some big success had come a year before or after any one of these moments, I might have hesitated a lot more, or my parents might have hesitated a lot more. But I was very lucky with the timing. So 10th, I won the national championship. 12th, shortly afterwards, I became a Grandmaster. And when I finished my BCom, I was playing Kapo when I was 9th in the world. And those kinds of confirmations, well, I never had to think about, I mean, never had to seriously worry about whether chess would be an appropriate career, because the feedback was so good at that time.
That's true, and the feedback's always been good. But Aruna, you know, he's described you as rock, always, the person, like, you know, as they say, the cliche, but the woman behind the man, so to speak. For you, when you married him, he was famous, and you were marrying this superstar of chess. How big an adjustment was it?
I think it was an adjustment for both of us. I don't think it was only me making the adjustments, because he was already traveling a fair bit abroad by himself. So I think suddenly to have somebody in the room and somebody's opinions had to be taken into consideration all the time. I think for him also it was a big learning curve. But I think, like he said, he had good tournament results soon after we were married, so it kind of
worked out.
It cushioned the blows.
But, you know, it's interesting. Here is this world champion, 5 times world champion. Of course, that came later, of course. But this Grandmaster, and there is this wonderful anecdote that, I read about recently, that he didn't remember the wedding anniversary. What was that adjustment like? That here's this whiz, but he can't remember like normal dates that he should remember.
I think that was part of the learning curve. I think very quickly we understood that, you know, he was very, very good at chess, and everything else was not going to be so easy. So actually many years into our marriage, Anand suddenly became very clever and he started using technology. So he would leave voice notes and write post-its to himself saying, on this day we discussed this issue and this was what was decided, because he knew at some point I was just winging it.
But it's interesting, it was not just Anand that you were sort of actually looking after, it was the entire team. So it was almost being like this manager of this team that just had to crack it always. Was that difficult to?
At times it was, because at times, at very crucial moments like in a match or when they're preparing for long months, there was a lot of egos that were at play, and most of them, they're giving up their family time, their personal careers for Anand's sake. So there was a bit of, they would say that some of them would not feel happy or some of them were being too overbearing in a training camp. So these kind of issues would happen, but mostly I think I was like their mother hen. So in fact, there is this nice anecdote. We had this Radoslav Wojtasek, who joined our team in 2008. He was like the baby of the team. And I used to take care of him with so much of love. So like many years later in 2014, when Anand was playing the World Championship match, he was not well. So I said, I have this cold medicine and you should take an inhalation of this. So Anand said, he has a girlfriend, she has sent medicines, back off. So then I told Anand, the bird has flown. And I really felt so sad, like he's no longer my baby. So it was almost personal for us. And I think all of them have visited us at either in Spain or in Chennai. So for us, it was almost, they were just part of our family.
No, and you're so right, because throughout the book, I almost got a sense that, the two of you had a global family. The number of people you met, and you especially speak about Maurice.
That's right.
And it's wonderful to see that the connections that were established over your many years of playing.
Actually, I used to joke with Anand that, because he's traveled abroad and all, people thought, you might have girlfriends. I said, the only thing he picked up was mothers. So I had mother-in-laws in every country who were keeping a watch on me.
That was never good for her. But is it, now that you're back here, do you kind of miss that, or,
It's true that when I started traveling, I met some people, and I was surprised how open they were. I mean, they took me in literally in their houses and treated me like family, and without their help, life would have been much more difficult then. There are many of them mentioned in the book. But it's still okay. We're still able to communicate and travel. I guess part of us misses Spain and living there because we really enjoyed it. But part of us wanted to just come back, and that was decisive, I think.
No, I'm sure we're all very glad you're back. One very interesting thing in the book that you write about was that after you won, and won 5 times, there was almost a sense of loss because there was purposeless. The sense of purpose had gone. Just talk us through that. What was that like? I mean, you were on top of the world.
Yes, there's this very brief transition. I think if you take some of the matches, while the game is still going on, you know that despite all the precautions you should take against relaxing too early, everything, you know that some things are coming home again. I mean, the position is so won, and you can almost sense that your excitement peaks then. And by the time the game is over, and this works at a defeat as well, because by the time you've lost the game, if you've come to terms with it, it ceases to bother you. So the emotions and the results are not synchronized time-wise. And so often I'm incredibly happy a few minutes before it's going to happen. Then when it happens, you have this big relief. The moment you know that it's 100%, it's in the bag and the arbiter has signed and nothing can be reversed anymore. Nothing can go wrong anymore. You're just incredibly happy. Then you get up, you shake a few hands, and about 3 minutes later, you're feeling empty. And this is not a long-term thing, because over the next week or maybe even the next 2 weeks, you'll walk around with this vague sense of satisfaction. But that intense happiness has gone, and it goes like that. And I found this happens quite repeatedly. So by the time you tell people how happy you are, you no longer are. And you're almost describing what the state was a few minutes ago. But it's like that. Something in you has moved on, and that's how it is.
But if that is what happens after a win, how does one deal with the losses? How do you deal with the losses?
Again, the worst thing about losses is the moment you know that it's going to happen. The moment you realize it's going to happen, and always when it's unexpected. If you've been fearing it for a long time and it happens, it's more relief rather than deception. But sometimes you'll make a move and you won't see it at first, and then suddenly it'll hit you that it's a terrible blunder, and then you may realize that your opponent has seen it as well. And that moment you start to adjust to the new reality. And after that, by the time you resign, in fact in the book I talk about one of my mechanisms, which is once I've come to terms with the defeat, it frees you to resist as long as possible, because you think, I've lost this game, now let me just enjoy putting it off for my opponent as long as possible. I've done this several times, and the bits of that in the book as well. It helps you resist. But I think the moment you realize something is going to happen is when the emotions happen, and disappointment or happiness, just things you come to terms with.
Aruna, I was again reading recently where you said that earlier when he lost you would talk to him, and now you just send him emojis. That's quite a transformation.
Okay, those days I was physically present, and now it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, and you can't really be processing so much of deep thought. But also, I guess because we've been married for so long and we've traveled, fair amount together, I think we just don't need to say so much as before, so maybe an emoji kind of sums it up.
But tell me, how does one, you were Grandmaster when you were so young, then 5 World Championships. What is it that keeps you going, apart from the victory? I mean, is it sometimes, is there days where you're just, okay, throw the chessboard away and that's it, I'm done?
All the time. I mean, I'm continuously distancing myself from chess, but then I come back. I really can't resist. Possibly because what I experience in chess is more intense than what I experience in any other activity. I mean, this I'm doing at a very high level after so much effort, and I can't equal that experience in something else. So the rest of life feels slightly mundane by comparison, and that draws me back to chess. I enjoy playing, and simply that's the reason I keep playing as much as possible. I guess it's a kind of rush, or it's an addiction in a way.
It's a great addiction. In the book, you talk about how your mother was the one who encouraged you to write. And she said, you have beautiful thoughts, and you write a diary, and it's helped you through your career.
Yes, I remember when my mother would encourage me to write it. And I even remember one instance where I had lost a game in the usual careless way I used to lose in those days. So let's say highly avoidable. I lost, and I came back kind of sheepish looking, and I told my mother that I had lost, and pretty much described that it was the same mistake we had discussed a few times before. And then she said something to the effect of, how many times are you going to lose the same game? Why don't you at least this time write down something and learn something out of it? In this way that parents can really irritate you, get under your skin by saying something. No? So in that style, it was tossed out. And I was livid. So I go and I mean, totally gratuitously, I give my opponent's moves all exclamations, which is the symbol for a good move. And I say every one of my moves was made by an idiot almost. And you can see the anger, but I'm mostly angry with my mother for telling me to do this and all that. And I write this down. But without these notes, I would not remember how intensely I felt in those days. So she was right, I think. Also, a Yugoslav grandmaster called Ljubojevic, he, interestingly enough, because many years later, he told me the same thing. He said, Vishy boy, you should keep a diary. You should write down your thoughts. And the analogy he used, so it may well be in a Serbian proverb or something, but it was very beautiful. It stuck in my head. He said, only streams have interesting things to say. By the time they reach the ocean, there's nothing left to say. So write it now while you can, sort of thing. And but yes, because and even now, when I'm angry, sometimes I'll just go and write something on the computer and put it somewhere. And it's not particularly organized or anything. It's all over the place. But when you read that, it takes you back very strongly and gives an amazing amount of detail. Because when I look back at, let's say, Mexico now, it looks the most smooth, glorious event. But if I read some of my preparation while the games were going on, while the rounds were going on, so around about round 8, 9 out of a 14-game event, you can see how paranoid and conflicted I am before the game because of all the things that can go wrong. So, before the title was in the bag, all my worries are knocking around. And if you don't, but that stuff you forget very fast. So if I hadn't put it down somewhere, I wouldn't remember.
Also in the book, you write about the fact that every player has to, or every person has to have the ability to be creative, to kind of adjust to new things, because you say that if AI can take over pre-managed things, and I thought it was really interesting because I had recently interviewed Yuval Noah Harari. He's this very famous author, and he said the same thing, and he said that, possibly doctors will get replaced, but what you need are singers and writers, because original creativity. So tell me, how much of that comes into when you play chess? Is there that every time that you go into a new tournament, you have to think about new moves? How does that work?
Yes, I mean, before every tournament, you should have a set of ideas which are not widely known. What I found that surprise value in chess, I would rank it as more important than accuracy. So you can have some new idea that broadly people aren't familiar with. Some may have studied it, but it may not be top of their mind. They won't have a story to remember it with yet, and so on. And you need a certain amount of those, because if you simply play lines which everyone studies and remembers well, you'll get nowhere. But with computers, we are constantly exposed to unusual moves or exceptions to the rule. So chess players now and before, when we didn't, before computers, we evolved certain broad concepts. Put pieces in the center, get the king out of the way, castle, never move the same piece twice till all the pieces are moved once. Very simple, basic rules. And these rules function so often, you tend to think of them as almost laws rather than just, but they're almost statistical, because they work a lot of the time, but quite often they don't work. And when the computer constantly confronts you with unusual ideas, at first you reject them because they just feel wrong to you. The second time, you warm to them. The third time, you're actively looking for it to yourself, and that is part of the learning. That is what makes working with computers interesting, because these are ideas you almost certainly never had yourself before, and they keep on appearing in new forms and new shapes, and this is where you're evolving. And if you're not doing that, the chances are very quickly you'll fall behind the others. So there is no use doing what is already well known and well established, because the chances are everyone's doing it at the same high level as you. It's only this which will make any difference going forward. So it's only this that, and nowadays, I don't need to do any analytical work anymore. All I need to do is to understand the analytical work of the computer. But this means now that I go much deeper than before. So before I would go 3 or 4 moves down the line, it would be enough, because I'd say I'd work the rest out. But now I realize the computer's lines are maybe 7, 8 moves deep. And if I don't understand every last detail, not only the lines it's showing me, but the lines it's not showing me and why they are bad, or why they are ranked below the line it's showing me, unless I can go very deep. So I'm getting a lot of new processed information, but unless I master it, so this is a completely new way of looking at chess. So the way I work now doesn't resemble the way I used to work before at all. But without that, I'm gaining nothing from having this powerful tool.
Aruna, when you married him, you didn't even know how to play chess. Do you play now? Do you ever play with each other?
We played once.
And he gave up?
I wisely offered a draw.
I think that was a very wise move. But tell me, do you miss the traveling? I mean, the first years of your marriage were hectic and sort of like a new rush for you. Do you miss all that?
I do miss it at times, because, okay, it's a different world, but I feel happy that, I had so many years at it, so that now when Anand goes to a tournament and he describes the situation, I can relate to it. It's not something that I completely don't know of. But now there are new chess players I've hardly met. Some of them could be our children, because that's the age gap. But it's nice that I had that life, and now this is just a new kind of life, which I enjoy immensely also.
Last but not the least, again, you write about how one of the people who played a lot with you, Kramnik, he now says that he's retired, but he's busier than ever. What are the plans looking that side? Do you think there is something that, you know?
Look, that day will come, and my attitude right now is I should play as long as I want to play, and then when that day comes, I should no longer regret, and I should embrace that life fully. But this year I plan to have a full calendar. I mean, in 2020, and so for the moment, that's not on my mind. But my attitude should be that you shouldn't keep looking back. So while I'm playing, I should keep playing, and then when the time comes to stop, be happy with that.
We hope the time to stop never comes. Thank you so
Thanks a
much.
lot.
Thank you so much.